Hopefully. Okay. どうぞ。
Hello, welcome to Tozen Daigaku. On this edition, we will discuss Japan's Corona support schemes. My name is Louis Carlette. Last week we did Shakai Hoken, and this week we will go over the various aid programs that the Japanese government has set up for small businesses, workers, and households. Okay, so let's see. Today, let me bring up the outline for today. This is what we'll be going over. Okay, so as you see, the first one is the Kyugyo Tate furlough pay. This is kind of well known at this point that the employer must pay at least 60% for the time that they furlough you because of coronavirus. I'll also discuss question 4, which was a Q&A that the Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare posted on their website. And the question 4 is particularly relevant for how much employers should pay you. After that, I'll discuss Japan's Koyo Chosei Joseikin payroll protection program. This is for small businesses to help them continue paying their employees rather than laying them off. And this is very important to avoid the huge unemployment numbers we're seeing in other countries. Okay, after that, we'll discuss the Small Business Rescue Program. It's called Jizoku Ka Kyufukin. Then we will discuss number 4, the April 20th special Tokubetsu Daigaku Kyufukin one-time payment of 100,000 yen. I think many people know about that. We'll discuss a little bit about how to get that. Number 5, this is something that's not so well known, but it's very important. It's Jukyo Kakuho Kyufukin secure housing aid. If you're having trouble with rent or mortgage, this can help you out. Then we'll go through a couple systems that existed before the pandemic: Shobyo Tate accident sickness benefit and the Shitsugyo Tate unemployment insurance. Then we will discuss the在留資格 visa renewal application 3-month extension. This is the immigration agency has extended the application deadline. And then we'll finish out with the April 30th directive on special permits for working outside your visa if you are a foreign citizen. Then we'll have a Q&A to finish it up. Okay, so let me go from there. And 1 second, I'm not that good with technology, but okay. Okay. Now I'll go into more detail. Okay, but first of all, the Corona Kyugyo Tate furlough pay. And what I've done here is I think it's very important to be sure to use the Japanese word as well as the English. So, because if you're trying to apply for these things, or if you're discussing them with your employer or with a government office, it's important to know what is called in Japanese, because often they're translated in many different ways in English. So in order to know what you're talking about, it's important to know what the Japanese word for that system is. And the Kyugyo Tate furlough pay is based on Article 26 in Labor Standards Act. In the event of an absence from work for reasons attributable to the employer shall pay an allowance equal to at least 6% of the worker's average pay to each worker concerned during the period of absence from work. Now this existed before the pandemic, of course. And what it is about is suspension of operations. Now it says absence from work, but what this really is a suspension of operations. And when an employer decides that they have to suspend the operations, and it's not completely unavoidable, if there are ways to avoid it, that they decide to do this, if it's their responsibility, then they must pay at least 60% of wages. Now, the principle here is Article 24 says that they must pay all your wages. So if you have a contract with a certain monthly guaranteed salary, then each month they must pay that whether or not they give you work. However, in certain circumstances, they can suspend operations and only pay you as low as 60%, although of course they can pay more. And this is a bare minimum for if it's the employer who decides. It says for reasons attributable to the employer. And that basically means if the employer decides, they're not forced to do it, and it's not the employee, it's not the worker who decides. So this should be contrasted with what's called force majeure, or in some countries, what's called an act of God. So if there's an earthquake and the factory, becomes dangerous or unstable and they have to suspend operations, in that case, the employer doesn't have to pay anything if it's completely unavoidable. And this is called fukakoryoku in Japanese. Let me write down this is the Japanese here. Okay, now in these cases, again, they don't have to pay anything. However, during this time of the pandemic, it seems clear that fukakoryoku does not apply, that they do have choices. And one of the reasons that it's not force majeure is that the government did not order employers to shut down. They encouraged them and they asked them and they requested them, but they did not force them. And there was no, earthquake or fire or something like that. So the employer chose to suspend operations. And so they must pay at least 6% in this case. Also, it's important to note that they actually must pay 100% unless they made or did their utmost to avoid the suspension of operations to begin with. Okay, so now so again, this is a minimum of 6%. Now there's what I call question 4. Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare, since the pandemic began, they posted a series of questions and answers, and they put their opinion on there. And what's really interesting about this is question number 4 of all those questions was, I think, a very important thing for workers in this country. So the title of question 4 was measures when placing workers on leave, including kyugyo tete, furlough allowance, and special leave. Note these points regarding furloughing workers. So in this section 4, it's actually not question 4, it's section 4, but question 1 was, what points should we be careful about when corona furloughing our workers? Now this is geared towards employers, this section. And so what the ministry says to employers is, when furloughing your workers, discuss sufficiently with your workers or union, and please be sure to set up a framework based on management labor discussions to ensure that workers can take off without anxiety. So this is really key. Many employers out there are deciding unilaterally what they're going to do. They're deciding, okay, we're going to pay either 100% or 60%. Some employers, believe it or not, are paying 0. And the problem is that they're deciding unilaterally. They must discuss with their employees, with their labor unions before making the decisions. Now, I say must, it's not a legal requirement, but the ministry is urging them to do so.
Oh, sorry, Liz.
Yes.
I got a comment that your keyboard sound is really loud. So are you using a microphone or something?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll be careful with the keyboard. I'll try to avoid it. Okay, thank you. Okay. So yeah, so the ministry is urging employers to take this consideration to avoid problems later down the road when if workers had no say in what happened. Okay. So the ministry also says, consider all the circumstances, and you must pay a furlough allowance of at least 6% for the period during the suspension of operations. Again, in line with Article 26. And I'm going to the next page. The ministry goes on. Under the Act, you must pay the full 60%, but in order to set up a framework that will enable workers to take off without anxiety, then each corporation would do well to stipulate in their work rules and other documents that they will pay more than 60%. For example, 100%. That's exactly what the ministry says. They give an example of paying 100%. If you do this, meaning pay more than 6%, and you meet certain eligibility requirements, then you'll be eligible for financial aid under the Koyotose Joseikin Payroll Protection Program. We talk about that later. Now, what the ministry is doing and what the government has been doing is, and I hate to defend the government, but what they're basically doing is trying to avoid the huge unemployment rate they see in the United States and other countries by making sure employers can keep paying their workers even when they're not working, even when they're staying at home on standby. So they're saying, okay, look, if you pay more than 6% to your workers to stay at home while you suspend operations, we will pay you in this payroll protection program. And we'll get to that later about how much they're going to pay. So it's a system to kind of protect the status quo so that when the pandemic ends, the economy will not suffer too much damage, because high unemployment rates, of course, are very damaging to the economy. It basically restructures the whole economy. So that's something that they want to avoid. They say if you furlough workers based on force majeure, then it is not the responsibility or decision of the employer, so you have no obligation to pay a furlough allowance. Now, the prevailing interpretation is that you have to meet two conditions to claim force majeure. The first is that the accident that led to furlough was external to the business. In other words, it wasn't the business's responsibility. And the second is that the accident prevents the employer from avoiding suspension of operations despite making the utmost effort to continue business as usual. Now, this is what I referred to a minute ago. The employer must try to avoid suspension of operations. And if they don't, and if it was an accident, I mean, again, this is usually an accident or an incident that happens outside the company, then they must pay at least 60%. One good example that applies a lot to Tozen Union is we have many teachers and many schools are switching to work from home and online lessons. So these companies that do try to go online with their lessons are making an effort to avoid suspension. However, other schools are not making an effort, are not switching, or at least one school that I know of is not switching to online classes. And so they cannot claim that it's force majeure in this case. So you must do your best to avoid it, and including, and not just schools, of course, many jobs, and many administrative jobs and other jobs can be done from home. Many universities around the country are also switching to online classes using like Zoom, like we're using now, and other platforms. Okay, so that's basically how the Kyugyo Teate system works. Now, another thing to understand is that the 60% is 60% of what's called average pay, or heikin chingin. And average pay is not necessarily what you might think. There's ordinary pay and then there's average pay. The ordinary pay is, well, you take your monthly salary and divide it by the number of days you worked, and that's what you normally think of as your daily wage. However, what's called average pay, or heikin chingin, is actually you take the previous 3 months' pay, the total of that, then divide it by all the days.
Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah.
Some people say people can hear you clicking like a mouse. So could you move the microphone on the PC or somewhere?
Okay. What I'll do is I'll switch the mic to the.
Can you mute then? Can you mute yourself?
Yeah, but then I can't talk. What if I change the mic to the camera? Is that better?
Yeah, I think we got.
If I mute myself, I won't be able to talk, right?
Yeah, that's like quality is a bit worse, but still better. We don't hear the noise, I guess.
Okay, sorry about that.
Thank you.
Sorry about these audio issues. Okay. Okay, so to calculate average pay, you take the previous 3 months, take all the salary during those 3 months, and then divide it by all the calendar days. So say if you're discussing April, you would take January, February, March, which is 91 days, calendar days, and then take the entire salary and then divide it by 91 days. Now, because calendar days are more than work days, the actual number you're going to get is less than your ordinary pay. So that's something to consider, that your 60% may look like a lot less than what you would normally think of as 60%. Now, but again, that's a minimum, and different employers are paying different amounts, different percentages above 60%. And again, they have to pay more than 60% to get access to the Koyo Chose Joseikin. Okay, now I'm going to scroll down. Hopefully it's not loud this time. Mizo, how was that? Was it okay?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So number 2, the Koyo Chose Joseikin. This is the payroll protection program that I just referred to. So the ministry says, look, the economy is in real trouble. So what we beefed up our Koyo Chose Joseikin payroll protection program and simplified the paperwork. So this system existed already. And what they've done is they've provided more money into it and beefed it up, and they've made it simpler to apply for. So, and these are for small businesses that maintain their workforce without layoffs. So the point of this whole thing is to avoid layoffs and to make sure that workers can get through this period without losing, without seeing their income, drop like crazy. And they want to keep the system basically in place. What it does is it covers 100% of the Kyugyo Tate furlough allowance under certain conditions to employers whose prefectural governors ask them to suspend operations. Now, eventually all the prefectures did, although now there's some that are and some that aren't. So in prefectures where the governors ask employers to suspend operations, they can get 100% of the Kyugyo Tate they pay as furlough allowances. And of course, again, if they don't do any layoffs. Now, even where the governors do not ask them to suspend operations, which is a situation right now in many prefectures, this program will cover 100% of the portion that goes above 60%. Yeah, I think I forgot to put that in the English, but so there's a 6%, and it does is it provides a large chunk of that 6%, and then anything more than 6%, the system will provide that. Let me just put very carefully, sorry if it's a little loud. Anything above 60%, it'll pay the entire amount. So that's a very important system. And so if your employer claims poverty or cries poverty and says they can't afford to pay the Kyugyo Tate furlough allowance, then certainly hook them up with this system, and you should definitely protest that they can get the money from the system if they're assuming they're a small business. And large businesses can get something, just not as much as the small businesses can. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to go to the Small Business Rescue Program, and this is called the Jizokuka Kyufukin. And these are for businesses hit really hard. They are, like, if their sales or operating revenue falls by more than half compared with the year earlier during this period, they can avail themselves of this Small Business Rescue Program. Even not just small businesses, but if you're an individual proprietor, if you have your own business that's not registered as a corporation, you can get up to 1 million yen. And if you're a small business, up to 2 million yen. So again, another important aid to employers, which will help us as workers get money from the employers. Okay, now this is the next one, number 4, is not directly related to workers. This is the famous 100,000 yen aid, I think that everyone knows about. Excuse me a second. This was passed April 20th. It's called the Special Tokubetsu Daigaku Kyufukin. It's a one-time payment of 100,000 yen to everyone, not just per household, for everyone. This was a cabinet decision on April 20th. And the purpose is to prevent the spread of infection while propping up the economy. If people don't have money, then they're going to go to work even if they shouldn't, and even if it's risky. So the idea is to provide a little bit of aid to people around the country to make sure they can get through this intact, economically intact. Okay. Okay. Now, 12.88 trillion yen will be spent on this system. The national government funds all of it, but the local municipalities, like your local yakusho, will be running it. Okay. Now, this, I said this to everyone. It's to everyone who has a Jumin Kihon Daicho, the basic resident registrar. If they had it as of April 20th, I'm sorry, April 27th, 2020, if you have this on that date, then you are available to get this money, this 100,000 yen. So that includes all foreigners, includes anyone in the household that has that. Okay, so everyone should get an application in the post. You write in your bank information and provide copies of documents showing your bank account number and your identity, who you are. So like if you're a foreigner, you have a Zairyu card, something that you might have a driver's license, and then send that by post to your local municipal office. You don't have to go in, just send it by post. You can also apply online by uploading the documentation of your bank account and identity. Okay. Okay. So that's obviously a very important. If you haven't gotten the form yet, maybe contact your local city office and find out. And once you do, fill it out soon, get it underway. I'm not sure how long it's going to take. It might take different for different people. Okay. The next one, I think, is something that's not well known at all. This is secure housing aid, or Jukyo Kakuho Kafukin. I'm sorry, Kyufukin. Jukyo Kakuho Kyufukin, like a tongue twister. This provides support if you're having rent trouble or mortgage trouble due to the economic difficulty being out of work because of Corona. So this is really important. And again, foreigners are also eligible for this. The main thing is that you have to be able to work and have worked, and that your work is the main way that you make a living. And if you lose the work or are furloughed or laid off because of Corona, you can apply for this system. It seems like a pretty good system. You have to be under 65. You have to have been out of work for less than 2 years. Obviously, if it's due to Corona, that will be the case. You have to be the main breadwinner in the household. So if you're a couple, then only one of you can apply for this. And you must go to Hello Work and apply for work. This is very similar to unemployment insurance, where you have to go to work, you have to look for work. You have to get a stamp and show that you look for work, either by writing down the employer with whom you interviewed, or Hello Work has computers where you can look online for jobs, and then they stamp it. So basically the same conditions for getting unemployment benefits apply to getting this rent or mortgage help. Also, there are monthly household income caps. If you're a single member household, you can't make more than 138,000 yen a month. If you're 2-member household, the cap is 194,000. And if you're a 3-member household, it's 241,000. I don't know about 4 or 5 because it doesn't say anything about it. So I'm not sure what, I imagine it's the same amount as the 3-member household, but it doesn't say. Also, your total assets cannot exceed 6 times the standard for your region. For example, in Tokyo, in level 1 areas of Tokyo, if you're a single-member household, the standard is 504,000 yen in terms of assets. So you can't have more than 6 times that, which would be, what, 3.03 million, right? If you're a 2-member household, the standard is 780,000 yen, so 6 times that. And if you're a 3-member household, then it's 1 million yen. So you can't have assets exceeding 6 million yen. Okay. Yeah, another condition, like I said, you have to fulfill the job hunting requirements at Hello Work, including having 2 consultations or inquiries a month. Okay, now the amount that you get, they will cover all your rent, but it can't exceed the local area special standards. So for Tokyo level 1 area, if you're a single-member household, they will cover all your rent up to 53,700 yen. If you're a double-member household, they won't cover anything above 64,000 yen. But still, it's very important if you're having trouble financially and your rent is within this area, you can get all your rent covered for 3 months. Now, that 3-month may be extended up to a total of 9 months, and that's the cap. Okay. Now, the next 2 systems I want to talk about already existed, but it's just to review them really quickly and to note that, of course, they apply to coronavirus-related situations as well. So the first is Shobyo-tate, accident sickness benefit. Now, this covers 2/3 of your wages while you're out beginning the 4th day. However, you must be in Shakahoken at the time that you're out. So if you're in Shakahoken and you come down with COVID-19, and you're out more than 3 days, it'll cover not only the normal medical coverage from this system, from this health and pension system, but also 2/3 of your wages while you're out for any days beyond 3 days. However, most foreigners are not in Shakahoken. They're not enrolled in it. So this is something that they cannot avail themselves of. I'd say most Japanese citizens are still enrolled in Shakahoken. So that's something that's very important for them to use if they come down with COVID-19, or if they have come down during this pandemic. The next, number 7, is Shitsugyō Teate. This is unemployment insurance benefits. Now, first, this also you must have been enrolled in, and the employer pays 0.6% and the worker pays 0.3% of the premium each month. So it's not a lot of money. And the benefits that you get and the period for which you get them are based on your pay, your age, and how long you've been enrolled. Okay, so normally, if you leave on your own volition, if you resign from a position, then you cannot begin getting these benefits for 3 months. The idea is you chose to leave, so you can't just suddenly go get the dole. However, because of the pandemic, there's a special exception called Tokutei Ryu Rishokusha for those who left for a corona-related reason. You know, let's say you left because you're concerned about either getting infected or infecting others, or let's say your family member got COVID-19 and you have to take care of the family member, or let's say your child is off school because schools are closed and you have to stay home to take care of your child. Or let's say your workplace had a case of coronavirus. Someone was infected with the virus and had COVID-19, and for whatever, the workplace was shut down or something like that. In this case, you can get the benefits right away. So that's something very important. Okay. Now, another thing that's very important for foreign workers is the visa renewal application 3-month extension. This is for在留資格, which I translate as visa. Some people translate it as status of residence. In any event, as you know, if you're in non-permanent visa. It's a fixed term, and then you have to apply to extend it to another term or apply to change the visa. Now, many people's visa or status of residence expired in March, April, May, or June. And yet immigration was seeing so many people come to the offices as usual, and they wanted to avoid the, what's called the three mitsa, I forget what we call it in English, the, obviously a very congested situation with many people all together, not able to do social distancing. So what they did was they said, okay, if your visa expires during these 4 months, you can get it extended for 3 months further. However, the problem with this is that it's not clear that the visa itself is extended. It's just the deadline for applying to renew it. So we've been talking to the immigration and trying to get them pinned down that the visa itself is extended for 3 months. Now, what it seems to be the case is that the immigration is hinting that they won't crack down on people who work during this period. But as of present, we don't see any evidence that legally you can work during this 3-month period, which of course causes all kinds of other problems. However, you can apply for the extension 3 months later. You should definitely contact them and make sure that you're eligible for this. So that's something important to avoid congestion there. However, many people are going to get their visas renewed before the original deadline because they're not sure that they can continue working during this 3-month period. Okay, and also regarding visas and status of residence, immigration sent out a directive on April 30th for Shikakugai Katsudo Kyoka special permit for work outside visa. Now, normally, okay, you have your main visa. Let's say it's like a technical international, the Kokusai Gyomu Jinbun Chishiki visa. You can apply for a Shikakugai Katsudo Kyoka special permit for like a moonlighting job or like a little extra income in a different area in a different domain of work. However, your main work had to still be within the visa. Now, the Immigration Bureau understands that it's a very difficult situation for people in jobs, and they're letting people apply for this special permit, even if it's the only job they're going to have. So if you have a gig lined up, but it's not within your visa, you can go to immigration and apply for this special permit, even though it's not extra work, it's your main work, at least for now. So we'll see how long that lasts. Okay, so sorry for the technical difficulties. Now I will take questions. And one point I should say is that a lot of this I'm learning myself and learning with other unions, and we're trying to figure out how this is going. So I may not be able to answer your question, but if I can't, I can look it up right away and try to find out. There's a lot of details to cover, but I'll take any questions you may have. And I think Mizuho will relay them to me.
For now, there is no questions.
Okay. Okay. So also I should say that next month, we are going, on June 20th, we will have a Tozen Daigaku on Giso Ukoi, or bogus outsourcing. And that'll be our attorney, Shoichi Ibusuki, will be lecturing on that one. And I guess that's it, right? How many people do we have on the,
No.
well, yeah, okay.
12 or 13. Oh, one question.
Okay.
What's the definition of small business?
Yeah, that's a good question. Now, normally the definition was like a capital of less than 100 million yen. That was small business. And this is called Chusho Kigyo in Japanese. However, for this purpose, for this aid, it's different. And let me check that up right now. This is for the, one second. A very good question. Yeah, there's two definitions. One is based on the amount of capital, and one is based on the number of employees you have. So let me check this out. Oh, I should also say that, yeah, one thing I forgot to talk about was that the maximum that the government will subsidize companies in the payroll protection program was 8,000 or is 8,330 yen a day per worker. However, there's talk that it will be, I'm pretty sure it'll be raised to 15,000. So that's a huge jump. Let me see if I can find, is this visible right now? Oh, maybe not. This is visible, right? Mizo.
Yeah, I can see.
And here, yeah, this is the 8,330. Okay. Yeah, and for large companies, they pay up to 6,000. They pay 2/3 of the payroll, and for small business, 4/5. But if they don't lay off, they pay more. Okay, here it is. Okay, so small business is those companies, like in retail, the capital is 50 million or less. It's not above 50 million. So it's actually a little smaller than the traditional definition. And the number of employees is 50 or below. Okay, that's in retail. In service sector, it's 50 million capital or less and 100 employees or less. In wholesale, it's 100 million or less and 100 employees or less. And then all other industries, so probably whatever industry you're in is probably one of these all others, it's a capital of 300 million or less and employees 300 or less. So that's the definition for this aid program, for the payroll protection program. Just to repeat, the company's capital is 300 million or less, and the number of employees is 300 or less. Now, to find out what the capital of your company is, the Shihonkin, you can look on the website, and usually companies have a place where about this company or something, and it usually says what the capital is. And it often says how many employees. If it doesn't, you can get the corporate registry or Tokibo Tohon at the, what's it called, the Justice Bureau, at your local Justice Bureau. There's one in Okubo and one in Kudanshita. And they will, anybody can walk in and get any corporate registry. You don't have to be an employee. You just walk in and say the name of the company and the address if you know it. And you can buy it for like less than 1,000 yen. I forget the exact price. Okay, any other questions?
Yes, the next question is regarding the 3 months extension of the visa. Is there concern of being stopped or bothered by police even with the 3 month delay of the deadline? Could you clarify about the visa extension a bit more?
Yeah, okay, and again, it doesn't look like it's a visa extension. And this is something that's really, either it's an oversight, or I don't know why they did this. Because if you're employed, it looks like you can't work during that 3 month period, even though the ministry hasn't, the Justice Ministry and Immigration Bureau have not, or I should say Immigration Agency have not said anything about it. However, you will be legal to be in Japan. So if you're stopped, if you show your, if you're a foreigner, you show your Zairyu card, your residency card, and on there has the visa deadline. Now the cops should know that the deadline has extended 3 months, so it shouldn't be a problem. I mean, yeah, we haven't heard any, we haven't heard of anyone who's had problems getting stopped. It should be okay. Just again, whatever you do, I would definitely contact immigration by phone and find out exactly, like, in fact, if you can ask them, you know, can I work during this 3 months and get back to us, that would help a lot, because we don't know what the thinking is. and to make sure that if you can't work, then you should get your visa renewed before the deadline anyway. So I don't anticipate the cops cracking down because you're past your deadline, because first of all, they should know it. And secondly, I think they're busy with a lot more important things right now. So legally, you're fine to be in Japan for 3 months after your visa deadline, if the deadline was in March, April, May, or June.
Okay, the next question is, do you know of any freelance teachers who successfully received 1 million yen rescue subsidy? They say it takes 2 weeks to pay direct to your bank, but it's taking even longer. Also, it was difficult to submit an accurate sales ledger if your income was 0 since April.
Okay. Okay, so you're talking about the rescue thing. Okay, let me hold a second. Wait, so the question is, do I know anyone who got it? Is that the question? Yeah, I mean, freelance should be covered because it's like an individual proprietorship, right? Hold on a second, let me just find my notes on this. Yeah, I don't know any details of how long it's taking. I know a lot of these programs are taking longer than people are happy with, and in some cases it's really causing a lot of problems because it doesn't, you know, the bureaucracy is grinding really slowly. However, there should be no problem with freelancers, individual proprietors getting the 1 million yen. I can't find it in my notes. Yeah, the Small Business Rescue Program, right? So we're talking about the Jizokuka Kyufukin, and it's for many different industries, and for those who see their sales fall year on year by more than half. So yeah, so what it requires is you probably have what's called a Gensen Choshohyo or many Gensen Choshohyo. Each of your clients, they usually withhold taxes, and then they're supposed to send you at the end of the year. They're supposed to send you a little square thing called Gensen Choshohyo or tax withholding form, and basically you add them up, and then when you apply for your taxes, which, you know, this past spring when you applied for taxes, you should give your entire income. You should declare all your income from the previous year based on all these Gensen Choshohyo or other ways that you can identify it. And then you pay taxes or get refunds based on that amount. So what you do is you look for the same period the previous year. So if it was April, May, you saw your income fall by more than half in April, May compared with April, May of 2019. Now I know it's a pain in the neck and it's a lot of paperwork, and not everyone keeps all their documents so well. I know I don't that well, but if you can do that, and if you can show, again, based on your taxes, actually, so the taxes, whatever you submitted with the taxes, if you know when the work took place, if you know, okay, this job was in April, this job was in May, blah, blah, and you can show a lot last April and May, and then this year, a decline of more than half, then you should be eligible for the 1 million yen, although I don't know how long it'll take. It could take a long time, unfortunately.
Okay, the next one is, if a company pays only 60%, do they not qualify for PPP assistance?
Yes, that's what it seems like the wording says. And I noticed that a lot of employers are paying more, in fact, like 80% or 100%. And if they, so if they just get 60%, then they should not be eligible for the Koyo Chosei Joseikin. And if they do pay more and they don't fire anyone, they can get all of the portion above 60%. So it's a really good system to protect employment. And that's why you see in Japan, like far lower unemployment figures than in the United States. So most of the employers I know that are paying any furlough allowance are paying more than 60%. And that's obviously, I think, the reason, because if they pay even a little bit more, they can get this aid from the government. So.
Okay. What's the difference between 事業収入 and 給与収入? What is the implications for 休業手当?
What was the two things? 事業収入 and
給与収入.
給与収入. Is this for individual proprietor or freelance?
It was a question.
Yeah. Is it the same person who asked about the freelance? I mean, 事業収入 is revenue related to your business. So basically, operating revenue. 給与収入, 給与 would be salary. Is it written in Japanese, like kanji?
No, it's written in Romaji.
I think 給与 is salary. Is there another 給与 that you can think of? So the 給与収入, if it means salary, which is also called 給与 or 給与, then it's from the perspective of the employee, and that would be an employee, not a freelancer. So whereas 事業収入 is from the perspective of a business and it's revenue for that business. So Mizo, does that sound right to you? The way I explained it? Is it 事業 or 授業? It's not 授業, is it?
It says J-I.
Yeah, okay. So does my explanation sound right to you? 事業収入 is from the perspective of a business, even if it's individual. And 給与収入 is from the perspective of a worker getting a salary. So it's salary income. Does that sound right to you?
Yep.
Okay.
Can we go next question?
Sure.
Someone said that their company had employees sign an agreement of leave to have a representative sign to get the subsidy.
Yeah. One of the conditions for companies to get the payroll protection program, the 雇用調整助成金, is that they must sign an agreement with an employee rep, a majority employee rep, or a majority union. Actually, the other way around. If there's a majority union, they must sign with that union, or if there's no union that represents a majority, then a majority employee rep. And that rep must be elected democratically and have the support of a majority of the employees at that workplace. So the employer must get an agreement to go on to suspend operations in order for them to get this aid from the government. That sounds like Jerome's question.
Okay, the next one is, my employer, Shen Eikaiwa, paid 100%, but told us we've to make up all the days later. I also heard if the days aren't made up, it might be taken from future month's salary. What do you think about that?
Yeah, okay. Shane Corporation is, Tozen Union has a local at Shane Corporation. And first of all, they have largely refused to negotiate. So it's very difficult to understand exactly what they're intending to do. What we understand now is that they are, at least right now, they're paying the full income of employees who intend to continue on beyond the period of the suspension of operations. In other words, in June and beyond. They're paying 100%. However, they've stated clearly in correspondence to their employees that that money is not furlough allowance, it's money paid in advance for future work. So in other words, in the future, they will be asked to, or they're already being asked to work in addition to their contract without getting paid because we've already paid you. So what this is a very clever scheme by management to avoid actually paying the furlough allowance like the law requires and the ministry encourages. So if you don't look too deeply, it looks like they're paying 100%. Wow, what a, you know, they're actually in line with social norms and what the ministry is asking. However, if you look closely, you see that actually they're just paying for future work, and employees are going to lose their holidays, their, you know, extra time and like that. Even though they're contract fixed term employees, they're going to lose this extra time. And another way that we know that they're not paying the furlough allowance as required by law is that those who are leaving in April and May during the suspension are not getting paid anything. And the reasoning obviously is that they won't be able to do the makeup days in the future. So they're not getting anything. And that's clearly illegal because it is a furlough that the company chose to suspend operations. And not only that, they didn't make any effort to switch to online lessons or otherwise avoid the suspension of operations. So clearly illegal. And we understand, of course, that students, they want to make sure the students make up their classes because they have contracts for a certain number of classes. But that's between the company and the students. And if they want extra work, then they're going to have to make ask teachers to do it and pay them for the extra hours that they're going to have to work. So that's what I would say to that situation. That was Shane Corporation, in case you didn't catch the name.
Yeah, that's all.
Oh?
Questions? Yes.
Okay. Do you have any, Mizuho?
Nope.
If you have any, okay. It's probably hard to concentrate while you're actually running the thing, right? So.
Can you tell we're going to put Japanese subtitles, but it takes a bit time. So
can we put it up just as is for now and then put subtitles? Is that possible? Oh, you mean the Japanese? No, can we first put the English up soon and then later put subtitles? Okay.
Sorry, I got one more question.
Sure.
Yeah. What's the criteria to apply for 持続給付金? Do I need to submit a tax document? 開業届.
開業届. To be honest, I'm not sure. I know you're going to have to submit documents showing that your revenue fell more than half. I'm not sure all the documents. I'm sorry about that. I haven't been able to find the details on that. If I find it, I'll send it out to members. So definitely ask your local ward office or city hall, and they should be able to tell you that. And of course, by phone, or I haven't found it online yet. Definitely, you'll need documents showing that your revenue fell year on year.
Okay, that's it.
Okay, so we will put this up on our site as a video soon, and then later we may put Japanese subtitles, but that'll take time. But Mizo, is it correct today we can put up this video as is?
If there's no problem, we could upload by today.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was recorded, of course. Okay.
Yeah.
And then don't forget, June 20th, our famous lawyer Shoichi Ibusuki will give a lecture, a Tozen Daigaku lecture on giso ukioi, or bogus outsourcing. This is really important because a lot of companies, like let's say GABA and other companies, will hire workers but pretend that they're not employees, but rather little private businesses, even though the reality is they're just like employees. So like say for GABA, they have teachers, but GABA claims they're not even their own teachers. And so they're not employees. They don't have any rights under labor law. And this is a problem in other countries as well, like the United States and Europe. You know, kind of the Uberization of work, where the company says, we have no responsibility. They're just, you know, business partners. And GABA literally uses that word, and I think Uber uses something like that. So, and Tozen Union recently began unionizing Uber drivers and deliverers. So please tune in June 20th, 2 p.m. for that Tozen Daigaku. Thank you very much.